Hello, everyone. This is Daryl Guberman, CEO of Guberman PMC LLC, quality consulting from here in Connecticut. I just got back from a meeting concerning concerning Ken Paxton, Attorney General, Texas, has sued Pfizer for unlawfully misrepresenting the effectiveness of the jab and the efficacy and conspiring to censor public discourse. QA expert Daryl Guberman opens up Texans to reality. And this is the reality, ladies and gentlemen. Here we have a special guest, Mr. Ken Paxton. Now, I talked with one of his aides in his office. I sent them a copious amount of information concerning Pfizer, concerning what he's suing them over. But you know something? Nothing's going to happen because he is part and parcel of the National Association of Attorney Generals. And I'm going to show you why nothing's going to happen. And Ken, you may not know this. Sit down, relax, and you're going to get yourself an earful. ANSI is the American National Standards Institute, is a private corporation, not-for-profit. It has federal agencies and corporations on board. I'm not going to go into this entire mess I have on many videos, but you have, in 2015, the vice president of ANAB, the chairman of the IF, and he also sat on the IF 990 tax firm, Randy Doherty. He was there from 2009 to 2015. He handed over leadership to this communist Chinese national, Zhao Jinwu, who has been involved with our quality, Ken, for over, since 1994. He, at the time, was also the chief executive of the China National Accreditation Services, who, guess what, Ken, certified the Bio-Level 4 lab in no other than Wuhan, China. You also have a major guest here. You have Xi Jinping, who has mandated to Zhao Jinwu Article number 7 of the China National Intelligence Law, which mandates espionage. And if you didn't believe me, Ken, here he is, right in the Wuhan lab, handing over an ISO certification. Now, mind you, that ANSI, ANAB, the American National Standards Institute, and the American National Accrediting Board, 2018, ANSI took over complete control over ANAB. Are you getting it, Ken? Now listen good. And and what happened is that they are both together on this, and they are underwriters, which means that there's a failure in the laboratory, it means that they are responsible. Also, in 2017-18, a Miss Pamela Sale, the vice president of laboratory certification, said in a deposition that from one laboratory to another, there are variances and they lack protocols. Nice. You have ANAB that sits on ANSI's board. You have the factor that you have ANSI and ANAB both sitting on the board while China was looking into them very nicely. Sitting on ANSI's board are all these different federal agencies, which will be coming up, Ken, very shortly. They are underwriters, which means they are underwriters for the International Accreditation Forum Incorporated in Delaware, and also the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation in Australia. This is what IAF means. IAF means it always fails. Sitting right over by ANSI ANAB on the IF, and remember, IF is incorporated in Delaware, are these two countries. I'm talking about the politicians, Iran and Pakistan. Yes, the ones that admitted to harboring the terrorists of 9/11, and also Pakistan, who harbored the mastermind Osama bin Laden. They are equivalent in accreditation to ANSI ANAB. You understand that, Ken? Very nice. You have NIST sitting on ANSI's board, and you have NIST also getting compensated with a Gordon Gillerman, who $120,000 at the time, and it was considered a royalty payment. You also have the Department of Homeland Security, who also sits on ANSI's board during the time they sat when China was looking at them. You also have the factor that Randy Doherty was sitting on getting advertised, a private company. Do you hear that, Ken? A private company being advertised on a government agency website. I have all this documentation. And he was making $262,000. And by the way, royalty payments are really not taxed. It's a variance. The IRS doesn't really know what to do with it. Sitting on ANSI's board, Ken, is Johnson & Johnson, okay? Also, they had an issue. They had to actually return 75 million vials of COVID for contamination, skipping quality processes. You also have Pfizer. Pfizer's sitting on ANSI's board, okay? And they too skipped critical testing and cut corners and skipped quality standards to push out the COVID vaccine. You like that, huh? And the newest plant where the vaccines are being made have a past mold issue. Here are some of the federal agencies, Ken. Here you go. You have USDA. You have the Federal Trade Commission. You have the CDC, okay? You have the National Institute of Health. You have the FDA sitting right over by Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Abbott Pharmaceutical, etc. Best one is this one. You have the FBI, where Christopher Wray, director, states under many depositions to the Senate subcommittees and all that, we must maintain vigilance over China. Yet you've seen China was watching over ANSI, ANAB, infiltrating all our federal agencies. And here we go, Ken. Now, this is the Perez de Resistance. This is why I feel that you're going to be impotent, not important, impotent. And I have to say this. I was going to wait till after the first of the year, but I sat here as a constituent in Connecticut, not Texas. But listen, Texans, you have to think about how many representatives you have and how many people you have in the state. I'll give you, for instance, in Connecticut, we have approximately 3.6 million people being divided up amongst 4, can you call them representatives? Because they can't. It's theoretically and mathematically impossible for them to answer your letters. So you have 4 representatives watching over 3.6 million people. That means 900,000 people. They get one guy, gal, watches over 900,000 people. Doesn't happen. You have the factor that the National Association of Attorney Generals sits on the ANSI Homeland Security Standards panel. And here's a blown up picture of that. By the way, you can see it right here. Here is a better picture of it right over here. I'll hold it here a second. Here's another picture here of it. Let me get rid of the glare for you. And this is the problem. So you have the National Association of Attorney Generals, okay, Ken, and you have a problem with the factor of Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, CDC, FTC, FBI, all of these federal agencies. And you're going after Pfizer, and Pfizer sits on ANSI, and the National Association of Attorney Generals sits on ANSI. So you know what we call this? Here it is. Crony capitalism in its worst way, shape, and form. I'm going to leave it here because I know most people's attention spans are 7 seconds. This is Darrell Guberman here with Ken Paxton, Attorney General from Texas. And I'm just educating you in the United States and Texas, of course, and Connecticut and all over, all 50 states, that our attorney generals involved with the National Association of Attorney Generals is impotent, not important, impotent by the affiliations. Ken, it's not going to happen. If you need some help, my telephone number is 203-556-1493. But I am one person amongst the many who are the only one, it appears, to stand up. Because you know something? I love the man who can smile in trouble, who can gather strength from distress and grow brave by reflection. 'Tis the business of little minds to shrink, and he whose heart is firm and conscience approves his conduct shall pursue his principles unto death. Thomas Paine. 203-556-1493. I hope I gave you an education. And I thank you. And I thank you too, Jim, who works in his office.